Good morning, this is Uche and Njoku, sneaker principal, and this is my second video in a series of videos I'm doing this week. Actually, podcasts in a series of podcasts or video podcasts that I'm doing this week for Teacher Appreciation Week. I am a New York City principal. I'm a principal in the South Bronx, District 7, principal at MS 224, and I'm a principal who recognizes the fact that I cannot do what I do as far as leading the school without recognizing the teacher in me, and without seeing the teachers that I lead and teachers that I work with. I think that's something that's very, very important. A lot of school spaces, I hear teachers feeling a disconnect between leadership and them, and I've never understood that, because at the end of the day, if you are, for the most part, I would say 90%, if not even higher than that, 99%, if you are a school leader, you are a teacher who has, who chose the pathway of becoming the lead teacher of a school community, and not becoming a principal or becoming an assistant principal to be something outside of that role, but taking on that mantle and that title to say, I'm a teacher and I want to be part of leading a community of fellow teachers for the purpose of enriching the lives of children and educating them. So this week being Teacher Appreciation Week, I want to talk about those things that most people don't want to talk about, especially within that intersection of relationships between teachers and administration. One of the things that I have always pushed for is to eliminate this whole notion of us versus them, teachers versus admin. I never understood it. I just never have. But also, while my primary role was teacher and teacher leader, I struggle with that. I struggle with that because it become the basis of contention within a school building, how teachers or teacher leaders teacher leaders tend to be stuck in the middle, because the perception is that you're a teacher leader, so you're trying to become an admin. And so there's this great divide between teacher leader, and administration. But I'll tell you this. There's one thing I think if we all remember, especially as leaders, and connect and tap back into, we can better be able to really work with our teachers and work alongside them and establish trust and belief in one another's ability to do what's right for each other in the school community. And that's resiliency. One of the things that's really tough about this job is that it whirs at you, whether you're a teacher, whether you're administration, whether you're a school aide, whether you're a parent coordinator. There's always some form of attack happening, or at least it feels like it. Yesterday, I walked into my building, and from the moment I walked in, it was a testing day for the state for math. So typically, you would expect to walk in on testing day, and everything is like, okay, we're going to create a calm environment so everybody can work. From the moment I walked in, I had back-to-back parent situations, things that happen in the community, kids who are having conflict. Nowadays, a lot of kids don't want to do it at school. They will wait till after school to go, and handle their business at the park or somewhere away, thinking that the adults won't find out. But then the adults find out, then we get involved, and tempers are flared, and you're dealing with all that. And but at the same time, I'm still thinking, like, we have state exams. I have to be present to make sure that my staff is good, and not only that the kids are great as well. Testing day, but it wears on you, and you have to remember that we have to be resilient. We can't stop. We can't keep moving forward, and we can't burden each other with our emotions and what we're going through in that moment. And that's something I think is very, very important to remember, being resilient at the core of who we are, and remembering like this stuff is hard. I think it's very, very important, because when we do that and we see each other, teachers, administration, teacher leaders, the work becomes easier. We're less likely to take stances that creates that divide. So a couple of things I want to touch on, as a reminder from my colleagues who are administrators, principals, assistant principal superintendents, is just thinking about resiliency of our teachers and those who have it and live in it, and those who are building their resiliency, and those who are struggling with it. These are things we need to remember so we can really help them be better and greater. Because at the end of the day, without teachers, there is no school. We often say without students, there are no teachers. The reality is, without teachers, there's no school. And remember this, no one has ever said there's a student shortage. No one's ever said that. No one's ever said, oh my God, there's a shortage of students. No, children are being born every day. Babies are coming to this planet, and at some point in time, they're going to be in our school buildings, majority of them. But teachers, there is a shortage because people are burning out. And actually, let me take that back. They're not burning out. They're not seeing the value in what they're doing because they're not being valued. Okay? When you don't see the value in what you're doing because you're not being valued, why do you want to be there? Money and vacation days and all that stuff only goes but so far before you start to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I, get up early in the morning to drive to a place, sit in traffic, get to the building, sit in my car, and take deep breaths before I walk into a building riddled in anxiety? So that resiliency is very important because we need to find ways to further develop that, but it has to be something that's symbiotic where we're pouring into each other. So first off, we need to understand what resiliency looks like in teaching and how we impact it as leaders. And teachers, you need to know what it looks like and how you ask for support in developing your resiliency and seeing what is minimizing that from happening and what actually helps you develop your resiliency. Today there's so much happening that flies against what's been traditional. Once upon a time, you're the teacher, and the community poured into you. The community appreciated you. The community who you were. The community you go to a donut shop, you get that free donut because you're Mr. So-and-so. You're Miss So-and-so. You're the teacher. You're the coach. You've taught my children. You might have taught me. You might have taught my grandparents. Like, that is something that makes you feel great. And it actually just naturally makes you feel resilient and feeling like, okay, no matter what happens, this is what I do. But that's not happening anymore, at least not as much as it used to. Teachers tend to not really be part of the community, or at least not embrace the community as often. People don't care, maybe they don't care. Maybe it's not that they don't care. It's just that it's not grounded in our community anymore. So we have to find ways to reconnect to that space. Because again, as a teacher, the more you feel appreciated, the more you feel seen, the more resilient you are, the more you want to go through, what you have to go through to be great at your job. But at the same time, administrators, it's our responsibilities to find ways to see our teachers, to recognize them, to make sure they're being put in the forefront of appreciation. There are major challenges today. We live in such a divided world, so that teachers and even also administrators, we're not fully grounded in the community. Administrators is much easier because you're such a big face in the community, in that building, so people tend to know who the principal is, but they might not know who the teachers are. So it's our responsibility as administrators, as principals, as APs, as superintendents, to do as much as possible to make sure that our teachers are seen, that they're appreciated, that there are spaces for the community and to engage our teachers. I think it's very important. Like right now, I'm planning a dinner for teachers and parents, just for them to hang out and chill. Every time I've had an event where there was food and parents and teachers were engaged, I would always see this unintentional thing, because usually you have teachers sitting on one side and you would have parents on the other side, and then slowly they start to converge in the middle. They start to sit down and talk. They start to laugh and smile. And almost as if you start to see the humanity in each other. You're not just a teacher. You're not just a parent. You're two human beings who are having a human experience. And typically it's centered around a child that you both spend a lot of time with. And you start to learn from each other about that child. How many times have I had a parent say, wow, I did not know about that about my kid. I don't see that at home. And how often have I heard teachers say to a parent, wow, I didn't know your child did that at home. Well, they draw, they play the piano, they sing at church. And all of a sudden, the child becomes a multifaceted human being as well, not just one dimensional. But these things are hard to do when there's a divide there. The other thing too is the world is changing. Administrators and teachers, how are we finding spaces for us to learn about the changes in the world, technology and culture and even better understanding policies that are constantly shifting. Rather than just shooting an email, there needs to be a space for a breakdown of what's happening so that we're all on the same page, but not from a top down, like, hey, this is what you have to do, but unpacking it. We do that in the classroom, right? It's funny, I always thought, like, we always push for differentiation in our classrooms. We don't differentiate in professional development. We don't create spaces that allow for checking for understanding and for really deep dives into content amongst the adults. It's almost kind of like when we sit down and we're chalked and talked to, and as though that's acceptable. But if as a principal I walk into a classroom and a teacher's doing that to kids, that's considered ineffective teaching practices. Or are we not applying those effective teaching practices in how we deal with each other as adults? So there are major challenges that we need to really face that if we engage in and get better at, is only going to make teachers and even administrators more resilient in the work that we do. So strategies for building resiliency. We have to understand that for me, there are three points that we need to constantly address. Emotional resiliency is something that is very, very important. We talk about SEL work with social emotional learning with our students. We got to engage in that space with each other as well. Administrators, a lot of us are not socially emotionally strong. We're not. Some are stronger than others, but often we're thinking that our job is just to bark orders and just be like, this has to be done, versus understanding how do we engage with each other. There's a book, and I'm going to butcher the title. I think it was called "Speak to Me So I Can Hear You" or something like that. If I can find it, it's somewhere in my library. I'm going to put. Hopefully, I'll find it, and if I find it, I'll put it in the description. Great book about how we talk to people so people can hear us, understanding that everyone takes and receives feedback and information, or just hears things differently. We know that with kids. We know that with students. That's why we differentiate. That's why we know certain kids are auditory learners, some kids are visual, some kids are kinesthetic. It's the same thing with adults. You don't become an adult and that changes. So we have to understand how do we personally and our colleagues take in information emotionally. Yesterday there was doing testing. One of my teachers was late to cover another teacher. I guess there was a mix up in the schedule, and one teacher came out and was super frustrated and super upset. So I could see in her eyes were watering, and she was like, "This happened last time," and she's in the hallway. So I had to pull her into a classroom and say, "Please breathe and calm down. We don't do that in the hallway." And she caught herself. She was like, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. It's just I'm so frustrated." And I had to recognize that. I had to remove him from the space, give her time to breathe and unpack her emotions. And I said, "Listen, I will take care of that." I said to text that teacher, "Come see me." And I told that teacher, "Please see this teacher, because whether it's a confusion or a mix-up, this person needs to be made right, even if it's just through an apology or clarification of that misunderstanding." Emotional resiliency is very, very important, but we have to support that. We have to support the development of that. The other thing too is managing stress. Stress is a real thing, and it's not just about, people think it's just stress because of the job is stressful. No, or better, I'm sorry, the work is stressful. No, life is stressful. Just getting up in the morning, getting in that car and going through traffic to get to work is stressful. A million things happens, nonstop. You get a phone call, or you slept wrong last night, or your spouse you and them had an argument, or your children, you couldn't find the socks that morning. And all that stuff compounds. Then you walk into the building, the expectation, you walk into the building like a clean slate, complete BS. All those things are on your shoulders. And we have to recognize, as leaders, teacher leaders, administrators, and teachers, see it in each other. One of the things I appreciate the most is that I have staff members who will see me and say to me, hey, you look tired today. Hey, are you okay? You look upset. Are you okay? You look stressed out. And they will say that to me. And I appreciate that because I'm not a robot. I am a human being. And there are days when it's just tough. There's a million things that I'm juggling. But the fact that I have a staff member who bring me a pack of we call it those fruit not fruit roll-ups, but fruit gummies, because she knows that I like those, and she was like, here. And it puts a smile on my face, and I'm like, thank you. And all of a sudden, I have a boost in my resiliency through the day. But again, that doesn't happen if you don't see that in each other. Administrators, principals, superintendents, admin, you got to pay attention to your staff. And you got to pay attention when at the times that you can't pay attention. You got to maintain it all the time, because you never know when an act that you engage in will either minimize stress or increase stress. And then preventing burnout. That's a tough one, because again, I'm going to say burnout is not just based on what's happening in the building, in the classroom. It's compounded with life. So how are we creating spaces so our teachers, our human beings, including administrators, have the space to breathe, have the space to really not fall down that black hole of despair and pain and confusion and fear. And often, I'll tell you this, the biggest fuel of burnout is fear. Because when you're afraid of failing, when you're afraid you're going to get in trouble, when you're afraid, that exacerbates things. All of a sudden, your anxiety levels are high. You're constantly stressing. You're not sleeping. You're not eating properly. And all of a sudden, your body just starts to reject that space, because burnout is really your body saying, I don't want to be here. The question is the why. If you could get to the root of the why, then you can resolve what the issue is. But often, from my experience, the why is the policies and the level of engagement that we are providing for our teachers, for our administrators, for each other. Something that we need to definitely pay attention to. What are the barriers to creating a safe, well-balanced environment for people to thrive in? So I'm sorry, I'm going through my notes. So how do we support these things? Let's start talking about it. I encourage school communities to engage in circles of trust, sitting together and just saying, hey, how was the year? What are the highlights? And what were the highlights for you emotionally? We'll talk. And not everyone has to respond, but some people are going to talk and give courage to others to share. I am one who's comfortable with saying, hey, these things made me angry. These things frustrated me. These things excited me. These things really made me sad. Because especially as leaders, we have to be vulnerable enough and set the example for our people to really open up. I know a lot of administrators who say, nah, I don't get personal like that. But as a teacher, did you? As a teacher, the way I connected with my kids is by telling my story, my experience as a child, because I knew that was a way for me to connect with my students. I've spent my career working in the toughest neighborhoods in any community any city that I've worked in, and I grew up in a tough neighborhood. So why would I let those two things converge so that I can be the best educator I can be, so I can establish trust with my students? So as an administrator, as a teacher leader, I want to do the same things for my teachers, so they know that you're not alone. I went through that too. I struggled as well. I had leaders and administrators that I didn't get along with, or I didn't appreciate me, or made my life very difficult. And this is how I resolved the situation. This is how I thrived. This is how I grew out of those situations. But it's something that's very, very important, because when they hear your experiences and know that, wait a minute, you are just like me, you went through the same things, and so you understand, it makes the conversation easier. It creates a space for empathy. But one thing that I tell my teachers all the time, and is that empathy is very powerful, but I never let empathy become sympathy, then become pity, because we're always going to have high standards for each other so that we can do the best work that we need to do for our students. I'm hoping that the things that I'm saying here are resonating with whoever's listening, because at the end of the day, we have to create supportive teaching communities, and this is for everyone. When you have a supporting teaching community, everyone benefits. The teachers benefit, the students benefit, families benefit, administrators benefit, because we can really grow together in ways that defies the stereotypes of education today. It's not a us versus them. It's really about how do we together collectively come together to create spaces in which our students thrive, and we thrive as well. We're human beings. We're all human beings. We need to be in spaces where resiliency is the framework of the day. Like, constantly, we're always resilient. We're always smiling. We're always growing. And even when we're struggling, we know we're not alone, because there are people around us who are going to support us and help us be more resilient, so that we can have the impact on the world that we knew that we wanted to have when we became teachers. All right. With that being said, thank you so much for your time today on the Sneaker Principle podcast, and I'll talk to you soon. Be well.